the difficulty is not the difficulty comes when we're talking about marijuana in terms of the stigma of marijuana. But when we start talking about in terms of justice, arrest rates, especially as this is all linked to gentrification. When you talk about 1,000 persons moving into the district per month, and most of them are not African Americans, but yet then when we see arrest rates, when we even see the tickets for decriminalization, and 77%, I think that's what it is, 77% are African Americans. And we're talking adults now. I mean, the young people, the school age, that's one thing, that's being handled. But when we talk about, when you look what's going on Friday and Saturday night, depending on what club you go to, right, there's a different interaction. You know, where my church is, there's a Howard Theater diagonal across the street, and right around the corner is a 930 Club. Totally different interaction in terms of how policing is done, what's observed, who's told to stand aside. We've had young people who we thought we smelled marijuana, and these are college-age kids. They're no longer in college, not because they got arrested, because the police came in, and because they were students, you know, that put them into a whole, you know, that had its own justice system. That's not happening in GW, Georgetown. And it's not even the same class of drugs. In Georgetown, you know, he was running a meth ring. Right? That's not happening in Howard University. But the interaction is different. So as a question of justice, we don't have a problem as a faith community. That's why we're joining in. We've got to stop this. We've got to stop this hemorrhaging. We've got to stop this pipeline. Because as an 18-year-old, 18 to 20-year-old, you get that arrest record, now you're an adult. Now that, you know, when you apply for a job, apartment, you're an athlete. You know, the NCAA has its own rules. It's that which unites us. It's not marijuana use, right? But it's the injustice.
Yeah, I want to just add, because there are some issues in terms of really trying to educate lay people, because lay people, as Reverend Trent mentioned, they sort of see the stigma of it, and so automatically bristle in reaction to the suggestion that you would somehow lessen the prohibition on marijuana, right? So it's a matter of also educating people how to go further at this, and realize also that we have alcohol, but alcohol is legal, right? But just because it's legal doesn't mean it's any less destructive. But we don't really talk about that because it is legal, right? I mean, the fact is that you can get up hungover in the morning and go to some construction site and kill somebody because you hung over, right? Same effect, right? It's just that one's quote unquote legal and doesn't show up in your urine, and the other one is illegal and stigmatized. So it's a matter of educating people to realize that there is this place we got to come to. We got to come to this place because of what's happening to our folk, to our people within our community, and in terms of what's happening in terms of people just entirely being disenfranchised. We talk about things like voter suppression and sort of like going back to the old poll tax and all of those other types of things. Well, here you got another form of voter suppression. I remember the election in Baltimore, I think it was a couple of years ago, where it said that they simply put out a leaflet and they said, if you've ever been arrested and you try to show up to the polls to vote, you're going to be locked up. Right? Scare the daylights out of everybody. Everybody said, well, I ain't going to the polls. It's sort of like it carries forth in terms of residual effects. And that's what we're trying to deal with in part, the residual effects, as well as sort of trying to look at how we function as a healthier people.
From a law enforcement perspective, does the element of quota still exist at the precinct level? And does the element of quota still exist at the precinct level, and for what types of offenses and crimes are they applied?
Quotas have always been around. Quotas have always been around, and that hasn't changed. But you know, the more sophisticated we get, the more we're able to mask the quota system. And let me give you an example. It's every year police officers, during the time I was on the police department, and even now, you have a performance evaluation. The performance evaluation is based on what you do. How many doors you knock on, how many arrests you make, how many felonies, how many misdemeanors, how many moving tickets, how many parking tickets, all those kind of things. And the system is based on this numerical equation and the performance of those things. So when it comes for evaluation time, they're going to want to know the answer to those questions. And on a weekly basis, we used to call it a lie sheet for very good reasons, but we had to fill out this lie sheet and log how many all those things we did. And the police officers really called it a lie sheet because it was a joke. And then they have all your lie sheets for the 90-day series, and then they look at them and then tell you what you're going to get. And then that was tied into promotion also. But you know, in 1984, 85, 86, when community policing first came along, and the academics, you know, people like Tujinovich that was at Michigan State, and some of the rest of them that were really in the ivory tower on the whole notion of community policing, had really struck a note for progressive policing. Mm-hmm. They said that the way you act, the way you measure crime is the absence of crime. So the way you measure police performance is the absence of crime. Well, that was a joke to the police community, because the first question they said was what? How do you measure the absence of crime? Well, in the community policing model, you measure the absence of crime by surveying the customer, because the customer is the person who has the feel about whether or not the community is crime-ridden or crime-free. But the police don't really want to ask some communities. Some communities, they get it, they get the answer, and they don't even have to ask the question. But in the black community, you had to engage with the people in order to get the answer to the question. And then two, you know, we've been led to believe that the presence of police means that we have high public safety. The fact of the matter is, in the white community, the presence of the police, you don't hardly ever see the police in the white community. But there are components of that you have to understand. The white community has resources, they have control, they have access, they have other things that we don't have in the African American community that are directly related to increase or decrease in public safety. And then there's certain things that the police do they don't do in the white community. We don't see the heavy-handed over-policing strategies in the white community, and we still have public safety. But we've been led to believe that in order to have public safety in the black community, it has to be over-policing, heavy-handed approach, and everybody get locked up. Although when only 2% of the people who commit crime, or even think about committing crime, are the people who do it. The other 98% are law-abiding citizens who live in the community and just want plain old public safety. So it's a game. And the more sophisticated, the more technology gets involved in policing, you see them talk less about things like quotas, but as long as the system is based on what did you do, and then the officer saying, well, I made all of these arrests, wrote these tickets, and then that numerical setting is related to whether or not you're a good police or a bad police, rather than one who says that measure my performance should be measured on whether the absence of crime exists in my community. Now, when you tell your supervisor, and I used to tell my supervisors things like that, they didn't know what to do with me. They really didn't. They didn't really know what to do with me. But I read the books. I read all that stuff that the Tujinovich and them wrote. I read all that stuff that they were talking about when they were talking about community policing. And so you had to go out there and do it.